It's that time. We're about to kick off an episode of Consulting Unfiltered. We're here to share the real talk on career growth in finance and consulting. If you want to be a CFO, you want to get to partner at a firm, learn from true stories on how to achieve these goals. We will not hold back on anything. Get ready to laugh, learn, and level up your game. Okay, are there times when bending ethical rules is justified? We are going to explore the fine line between doing the right thing in our gut, what we feel is right, and legal rules and tax rules and all that fun ethics stuff. Welcome to Consulting Unfiltered, Adventures in Leadership. In today's episode, we're going to dive into the ethical dilemmas consultants may face in their profession. How can you handle the complex client relationships, but then also maintain integrity and kind of, do the right thing based on what you feel? What guidelines can help guide you through these ethical challenges? How do you navigate those kind of things? And we're joined today again by Laura. Thank you so much, Laura, for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to get right into it because I feel like we're going to have a lot, right? I every time I look at some of these topics, sometimes the topics that we're talking about, and I'm like, oh, okay, it might be a struggle to get through. This one, I feel like we're going to have just story after story after story dealing with the ethics, the positions that clients put us in. And maybe because we're also talking about leadership, maybe also the position our team puts us in. So we might be talking a little bit about that today. But just to kick things off, so what are we talking about with ethical dilemmas? Like what would that be? If you hear that, what would be the first thing that you kind of think of that we're talking about here?
Maybe breach in confidentiality, conflict of interest, taking credit for somebody else's work in the industry, maybe breaking a non-compete. Mm-hmm. It's funny because it's like, I was thinking about that the other night, and it's like when I had my tax service, I had a client that came to me, and I always said, okay, let me review your past 2 years' taxes. So I was reviewing the taxes, and I'm like, oh, so is this your wife? And he's like, no, that's my girlfriend. And she was on the tax return, joint return with him. And it was actually a CPA that had done this. And I was like, hang on a minute. We need to have a discussion about this. So I actually ended up going in and amending 8 years of taxes for him.
What state were they in that you could be together for 8 years and not declared married? I don't know what state that is.
This was that they had just gotten together that first year, they started filing together that first year, and this was in North Carolina.
Wow, that's amazing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was something that the different rules, yes. And then by state too, right? That's also. Mm-hmm. So what about if I were to ask you, what are some ethical dilemmas as a leader that you come across with employees? What are some of the things that you would think of right away there too?
Well, you've got to be able to trust your employees, but I have had previous experiences where I've had clients that have asked them to increase revenue numbers or put something in the wrong bucket. Mm-hmm. And it was not what they should have been doing because it wasn't a true transaction. But it's like, oh, just put that in there. Just put that in there because we need to get this ready for the board. We just need to knock this out. And so that's one way they've done it. Another way I've seen is where people will actually, if they're writing up an article, let's say they're doing a process, and they pull it right off the internet. Not their own words.
Plagiarize.
We see that a lot. Seen it on resumes too. So,
yikes.
I had one that was almost word for word, and you're like, whoa, wait a minute. So,
I actually, I didn't even think about this one, but we have had people who have applied for positions here. And, when people apply for a consulting position here, we have them go through a exercise to basically see if they can follow direction and then also kind of see where their thought process works out on things. And we have had people who have submitted and done word for word, like in a similar time frame, and word for word recommendations. And, or, like the best is, oh gosh, This was so funny. I said, I don't even know how this could happen because we do have like you have to follow a process, and basically we're trying to tie out inventory to the balance sheet. Inventory doesn't tie out to the balance sheet. We give them a 4-step, 6-step, something like that process to get inventory to tie out to the balance sheet. And we give them the file that they have to follow. And we had a wrong answer, but the exact same wrong answer. And I was like,
wow,
this is not right. Something is going on here. But I guess,
Yep.
it is a homework activity and people choose to do homework together. So it could be. Some of the things too, I think you're mentioning there. So some of the dilemmas that maybe as a consultant that you could run up against as well that I've seen is, the time versus output, right? Where they have to decide, okay, should I go back and amend the previous 3 years bank reconciliations to find 3 pennies, or should I just make an adjustment for the 3 pennies? So there's some materiality
absolutely
that goes into making the decision on the ethical side. What about when dealing with law though, right? I mean, is it in the consulting space, is it, the IRS law is the law, or is it that there is kind of sometimes also some materiality decisions that we have to weigh? Have you ever run up against that?
Yeah, I think you have to, I guess I would say creative accounting a little bit. There are times where you have to go in and weigh the decisions and see if there's maybe a loophole out there or some other way to process that would still be in line with the rules. But we just went about it a different way.
And just to understand that you are taking, so as a consultant, right, it's our job to show them and tell them like, this is a risk. If you do choose to go into this gray area, you are taking a risk, and the risk could be that, one of the ones that is the most common, right, is around 1099s. I would think like the most common that we see, right? Say, should I 1099 my contractors? The answer is yes, you should. You're supposed to 1099 people. That is what you should be doing. But if you don't, what is the outcome, right? If you mess up on it, what is the risk that is, that you might be up against, right?
Well, I've experienced that, and I've also experienced where they might have people that do not have a Social Security number. They're paying them illegally, and they want you to go ahead and process the documentation for them. And, that's a big no-no. I had a client, this again with my own practice, but I actually had a client that was doing that, and I wasn't aware of it at the time because I had just taken over the books and was going through stuff. My husband called me. I was at a different client's place, and he said, I need you to come home. There's an FBI agent and an IRS agent at our house. I was like, I'll be right there. So actually had to turn over books and for them to investigate.
Yeah. We do get those calls as well. So it's our job as consultants to make sure that they understand the risks that they're taking and understand that if it kind of comes down to it and there is pressure around it, what could potentially happen and what we would have to do to approach. And a lot of times, with those kinds of things, the risk assessment is, what is the cost benefit? What, literally, what is the cost? So, what it would be the cost for me to figure out a, tax return, or sales tax return, or how much I own income tax return in Wisconsin, who I sell to once every 4 years, versus, just waiting and seeing if Wisconsin's going to come in and audit you. So do you think that it's our job to make them aware, but ultimately we can't make clients do anything.
No, it's their responsibility in the end.
Yeah.
They're the ones who have to sleep at night.
I know. And then call us when the FBI is also knocking at their door, right?
Right.
So how can consultants, what are some ways that they can maintain integrity? Like, how do you maintain integrity, but also kind of help clients meet their expectations?
So with maintaining integrity, I think that you have to have transparency. Again, just be honest and truthful. If we can stick to the rules and get things filed correctly, that's the way we need to do it. With consulting, we're here to give them our opinion. So we definitely can do that, but we can also look and think out of the box and see if there's anything else that's out there that we can pull from. And we can also pull our team in. I mean, there's other people that can have some good input on that as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So one of the ones that we always, or I always say internally, right? Whenever somebody calls us and they say, hey, I need help filing my tax returns for the last 4 years, it's generally a client that I don't really want, right? Because that, first of all, we're not a tax return. I mean, we don't do taxes, but then also, I mean, if you are not taking care of your business at that level for that period of time, you're probably not going to take care of me. So,
well, and that's where sometimes you have to say, no, we are not a right fit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So can you share
yourself that hassle? I was just going to say, you save yourself that hassle of having to go down that road and then maybe having to make corrections later on because you find out that they don't want to change that direction.
Yeah. So, I mean, as a consultant, have you ever, I mean, because I know I have been called into, there was actually it has been very rare that it actually gets to the point where I need to be called into a court case or something like that. I remember there was a city that I worked with the city, and they used QuickBooks. They had payroll, but they had separate books. I feel like there was a consultant who went through, I don't know how, but influenced tons and tons of companies to set up payroll separate from their actual books, which I don't think is the best idea to keep two sets of books. But anyway, so they had a separate set of books for payroll, and then they had another set of books for what they were, doing their day-to-day accounting for. And then when I went in to coach the city, I don't know the woman's title, but she was basically the one in charge of the accounting. And she had a separate set of books. So there was 3 sets of books in this place, which maybe that should be a warning sign. I know we talked about on the fraud podcast. Maybe multiple sets of books is a big warning sign of fraud. But they had 3 sets of books. And I mean, my job was to go in there and just help educate her on basically the way QuickBooks works. She was new in the role. And then I think it was, 2 years later where I got the phone call from the state saying that we were auditing and wanted to know, what role I took with assisting this woman who worked for the city in embezzling money from the city, basically. But have you ever, has it ever gotten that far where you've been called into, kind of have to uphold your ethics to an outside party besides just your clients?
Not with court, but I did have a client that they were in construction and they were under a workers' comp audit because they got a bill and it was about a $7 to $10 million bill. I didn't remember the exact amount, but enormous dollars for this company. Well, what they had done is said, oh, well, it may be structural steel, but that's not what our workers are doing. We're doing doors, trims, and sash. So the difference per $100 of payroll was extreme because that was like a $67 rate for structural steel. And for doors and sash, it was like $8. And so we had to go through every single timesheet and figure out where this all landed because everything had gone into that bucket. And so they were in some pretty big trouble for that. So we were able to figure it out. But that's about the closest I've gotten to having a third party come in and needing to do the proof.
Yeah, I did. That actually triggers a couple. I definitely remember business owners explaining to me so that I could explain to the workers' comp auditors why somebody fell under clerical worker versus warehouse worker, even though they were clearly a warehouse worker, and asking us to kind of be that go-between. And in that instance, I had to say, no, I know full well they work in the warehouse. I'm here. I see it. They're out in the warehouse. So, I had to say, no, I'm not going to lie on your behalf. Now, if you choose to want to put it in writing, and I will deliver whatever you put in writing, or you can email it over to them, but I'm not going to be the voice of lie for you in this audit. Yeah, I forgot about that one. See, I just know they're going to start rolling in all these things. So, do you have any other ones that that kind of stand out for you as like in that moment? What did you have to do when you've had to say no?
Most of it has been around where there's some type of fraud involved, where they're wanting to do it through payroll. It's usually workers that are illegal. They should not be getting that documentation. I have seen people go out and actually get a driver's license, Social Security card that were not real, and they brought it to us. And if you're not doing those background checks, then there's that spot. You see these illegal documents that come in, and if you're just processing payroll, you're going through getting all the paperwork set up, and you got to go, wait a second, we need to do some checks and balances here.
I one of the ones I thought about too that I did help with, so I didn't end up saying no to, but it made me. It really put me in a weird spot. Was I had a client that they went and I don't know if they were going through like a M&A process or if they were trying to get funding from the bank. I forget what it was, but they had produced in Excel a balance sheet and P&L for the bank. And then the bank so they had consolidated things, right? And truthfully had moved stuff around that should not have been moved around. And so then they came to me afterwards and they said, well, the banks want more detail and I can't show them the detail because if they look at the detail, they're going to see that we move stuff around. So I had to go in and do a puzzle and say, okay, you guys gave me the end result. How could I have gotten there ethically? And I figured it out for them. And I showed them like, hey, this, move this out of equity and put it to a owner loan or whatever it was. I forget what we ended up doing, but they did give me an unethical thing that they had done and asked for advice in how to fix it without looking unethical. Now they are not a client still, but I did in that moment realize, because in that moment I thought, man, if they do not get this help, they're going to shut down. I thought about their 400 employees and all the things. So there is like okay, how do we get out of this? And then also that controller that was working there, I said, she's got to go. And she did after doing that. But I helped them to get out of it, right? Because the buildup of if there was a distrust with their banking institution, then they would have lost that relationship. So,
well, and I think you have to weigh that. I mean, is it going to hurt people? Is it going to cause problems like that? And sometimes you got to do a gut check. And I mean, does this make me sick to look at this and think about processing and helping them out with this situation?
Yeah. So then, what role do you think that the company culture, like what are things in a company's culture that would play into, making sure that they are ethical in a consulting practice? Like what kinds of things should we look for, or what kinds of things do we do that make sure that we have our consultants knowing and feeling comfortable, not just doing what the client says, right? Because everybody knows, got to keep clients happy, but also allowing for consultants to make ethical decisions.
Well, I think that comes to shared values and vision, because that helps guide that behavior in a company. Having that team environment where they can collaborate and open communication so they can share those ideas and provide feedback without fear of backlash. And then I think also when we provide a good work-life balance, I think that is a big key because people aren't looking for those other avenues. Providing education, so continuous learning, so they can keep pushing their bounds on their professional development. I think it leads to higher satisfaction. I think it leads to happier clients, lower turnover. But I think those are the main ones.
So a little bit in there. So making sure that culturally we know, right? We're being ethical in our decisions and making decisions not just based on process or just based on rules, but based on thinking. and then encouraging open communication and really listening to our consultants, right? Because a lot of times, they may, when they're bringing an ethical dilemma, they may not know how to communicate it, and they may not know how to get our attention to say, like, this is something that is keeping me up at night. So really listening to what they're saying and helping them navigate those kind of waters. And then sometimes it is stepping in for them, right? Which I don't like doing. I call that saving. I always say to our consultants, I'm not going to save you. I will give you all the tools to save yourself, but I'm not going to step in and save you. Because those conversations are hard when you have to tell a client no. It is hard when and you're not just telling a client no. In an essence, you're almost shaming them for doing an unethical thing, right, in that moment. And so it feels weird, but it's what you got to do to be a good consultant and have that confidence. So we're going to ask the audience that big question: are there situations where bending ethical rules is justified, and what would those be? So let us know what you guys think. Laura, thank you so much for joining us again today, and we will see you guys next time on Consulting Unfiltered. And that's a wrap on another amazing episode of Consulting Unfiltered. Don't miss out on all the candid chats and practical wisdom coming your way. Hit that subscribe button to stay connected and keep taking those steps forward in your career. We'll see you soon.